Why was she the only one who noticed the silence? The others had gathered in the tent, heads bent over maps, the low murmur of orders and radio chatter filling the air. But she could hear it, the absence beneath the noise. A silence pressing against her ears, thick as smoke. Something was wrong. She felt it before anyone said a word. She sat near the edge of the table, away from the circle of men who barely looked her way. The lantern swung overhead, shadows cutting across their faces, stripes of light and darkness. She waited for someone to meet her eyes, but no one did. They were planning the night raid like she wasn't there, like she hadn't walked through the same fire, like she wasn't about to be sent into the same teeth of the storm. And yet she said nothing, not yet. Her name was Captain Elena Markov, 34 years old, sharpshooter, quiet, too quiet for some, too dangerous for others. They called her the Ghost, though never to her face. She earned the name in another country, another war, one she didn't talk about. The colonel's voice broke through the haze. We move before dawn, 3 teams. We go light, we go silent. We do not come back unless we finish it. His eyes flicked across the room, past her, like she was a chair. Her jaw tightened, but she kept her hands still on the table, a discipline carved into her bones long before tonight. Because if she spoke now, she would have to tell them something she wasn't ready to say, something she had carried like a stone in her chest since the last war, and once she said it, nothing would be the same. So she listened. The men joked in low voices as they filed out, boots crunching on gravel, lighters flicking in the night air, cigarettes glowing like fireflies. No one noticed she stayed behind. She looked down at the map, tracing the ink lines with her finger. Villages, hills, a riverbed where the ambush would come. She saw it before it happened, the way a hunter sees the tracks in the snow. She whispered to herself, barely moving her lips, "They're not ready." And maybe neither was she. Outside, the night was heavy, cold air rolling off the mountains, carrying the smell of diesel, sweat, and the faint iron tang of blood. Floodlights cut harsh beams through the mist, catching soldiers in snapshots, loading rifles, checking packs, muttering prayers. She walked past them unseen, as if the world itself had decided to look away. Her sniper rifle rested across her back, weight familiar, almost comforting. It wasn't the weapon she relied on. It was the ritual, the way she cleaned it until the steel shone, the way she wrapped her fingers around the grip, steadying the tremor no one else saw. She stopped by the edge of the camp. A crater lay before her, wide and raw, carved into the earth like a scar. She stared at it too long, long enough for her chest to tighten, for her breath to catch. The last time she'd stood in a crater like this, she wasn't a captain. She wasn't even sure she was human, just a soldier buried in smoke and fire, clawing for breath while her world collapsed. Survival had felt like victory then, but standing here now, years later, she knew the truth. Survival was hollow if it carried no purpose. And purpose, hers, was still waiting in the dark. "Captain!" The voice startled her. A young soldier, barely 20, nervous eyes, hands twitching at his vest straps. "They said you're with Alpha Team," he stammered. "Extraction point is the riverbed." She nodded once, didn't speak. The boy shifted, uneasy under her silence. Then, in a voice that almost cracked, he whispered, "Do you think we'll make it?" She met his eyes. For a moment she saw someone else. A different boy, different war. Brown eyes that closed too soon, a body she couldn't carry fast enough. She blinked hard, shoving the ghost away. "You'll do your part," she said, her voice even. "That's all anyone can promise." The boy swallowed, nodded too quickly, and walked off into the dark. She watched him go, and the silence pressed in again. Hours later they moved. The mountain loomed black against a bruised sky. No stars, only the thin crescent of a moon, pale as bone. Boots sank into mud, rifles hugged tight against bodies. Every sound felt like a betrayal, the snap of a twig, the click of a safety, the ragged breath of a man trying too hard to breathe quietly. Elena walked last, always last, eyes on their backs, listening, watching. Her mind wasn't in the mud, though. It was drifting, back to another march, another night, another silence that had screamed louder than any gunfire. The mission had gone wrong before it began. She remembered the radio static, the order to advance, the way no one had listened to her warnings. They'd walked straight into the fire, and when it ended, when the crater was all that remained, she had been the one to crawl out, alone. The ghost of that night walked with her still, every step, every breath. She shook it off, focusing forward. She couldn't afford ghosts now. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. Something about tonight's mission. Something that made her skin crawl, that made the silence heavier than it should be. The target wasn't just strategic. It wasn't just another village, another name on a map. It was personal. And if she told them why, if she told them what waited at the end of this path, they would look at her differently. They might not follow her at all. So she stayed quiet, let them believe it was just another mission. For now, the squad stopped at a ridge. Below, the valley stretched wide and black. A thin ribbon of water cut through the earth, glinting faintly in the moonlight. Somewhere beyond the river, lights flickered. The colonel raised his hand. "We split here, Alpha with me, Bravo down the slope, Charlie hold the line." Men moved quickly, some too quickly, like speed would keep fear from catching them. The colonel didn't look her way when he gave the order. He never did. But Elena's eyes stayed on the lights beyond the river. She could see them clearer than anyone. Could almost hear the faint hum of a generator, the low murmur of voices carried on the wind. She knew this place. Her heart thudded once, hard enough she thought the others might hear it. This was where it had begun, years ago. The war, the crater, the ghosts, the place that had stolen her brother. And now she was back. Not for orders, not for strategy, but for him. She crouched low, rifle steady, eyes on the valley. The night pressed close, sharp with cold. A dog barked in the distance, then cut off. Her breath fogged in the air. She let it out slow, counting the seconds. 1, 2, 3. She thought of her brother's voice, the way he used to count the stars with her on summer nights. The memory burned in her throat. She blinked it away, sighting down the scope. Her finger brushed the trigger, not pressing, just resting, waiting. She could feel the boy from camp nearby, his nervous breath quick, uneven. She could feel the colonel's impatience, the men shifting in the dark, waiting for the signal. But in her chest, all she felt was the silence, and the weight of a truth she could no longer ignore. The radio crackled, the order came. "Move!" And the valley lit with shadows. Why did her hands feel steady when her heart was not? The rifle pressed cold against her cheek, the scope narrowing her world into one circle of glass. Shadows moved across the valley. Too many shadows. They weren't supposed to be there. Alpha team crept down the ridge, spreading out in broken lines. Mud sucked at their boots. Stones shifted under weight. Elena followed last, eyes never leaving the shapes below. The colonel raised his fist. "Halt!" The squad dropped low, silent, breath frozen. Through the scope, Elena counted them, figures slipping between the shacks, rifles slung, heads turning like wolves in the dark. Not farmers, not stragglers, fighters, twice as many as intel had claimed. Her throat tightened, but she said nothing. The colonel glanced at his watch, then toward the river. He didn't see what she saw, or maybe he refused to see. She felt the words press against her teeth, begging to be spoken. It's a trap, but she held them in. If she spoke, he'd dismiss her again. And worse, if she admitted what she knew, he'd demand the truth she couldn't give. Because this wasn't just another mission. This was her place, his place, and she couldn't let them know, not yet. The boy's whisper broke the silence. "Sir, something's wrong." The colonel shot him a look sharp enough to cut steel. "Hold position." The boy's shoulders hunched. He shrank into the mud. Elena closed her eyes for half a breath. She knew that look. She'd seen too many commanders stare down fear with arrogance, blind to the truth until it was too late. The scope stayed on the enemy. Men shifting, lanterns dimming, rifles angled toward the hills. Not random, not careless. They were waiting. Her finger tightened on the trigger, not to fire, just to remind herself she could. "Colonel," she said at last, voice low, even. "They know we're here." He didn't turn. "Stay in line, Captain." Her jaw clenched. She almost told him everything. The way she'd been here before. The way she knew the ground, the rhythms, the silence. But the words froze in her throat. Because if she admitted it, he'd ask how. And she wasn't ready to say his name. Not yet. The first shot came from the dark. A crack, sharp and merciless. One of the men toppled with a cry cut short. Chaos rippled through the squad. Rifles lifted, eyes wide, bodies pressing into the mud. "Contact," someone shouted. Gunfire erupted, sudden and violent. Muzzle flashes split the night. Bullets hissed through the air, tearing leaves, sparking off stone. Elena's world narrowed. The scope snapped to a figure in the distance. Breath steady, heartbeat slowing. One squeeze. The man folded into the dirt. She shifted, fast, efficient, another target dropping. Then another. Her mind shut out the noise, the chaos. It was only the rifle, the glass, the target. But underneath, something gnawed at her. The ground, the shacks, the very pattern of the attack. It was all the same as before. She could almost see her brother in the shadows. The night he'd vanished. The crater she'd crawled from. A shout yanked her back. "Captain, left flank." She turned, firing before thought, cutting down the figure creeping along the ridge. The boy, his face pale, breath ragged, looked at her like she'd saved his life. Maybe she had. But the guilt hit harder than the recoil, because she wasn't here for him, not really. She was here for herself. The firefight dragged on. Minutes stretched like hours. Men shouted, fell, rose again. The colonel barked orders, his voice hoarse with fury, but his plan was crumbling in the mud. Elena moved like a shadow, calm where others shook. Bullet after bullet found its mark. Her body obeyed without hesitation, but her mind whispered with every pull of the trigger. This isn't about them. This is about him. When the firing finally stilled, smoke clung to the valley. Bodies littered the mud, some theirs, some not. The survivors crouched low, reloading with shaking hands. The boy wiped blood from his cheek, not his own. His eyes darted to Elena, searching for something. Guidance, hope, anything. She looked away. The colonel stormed forward, face red, jaw tight. "We hold here, regroup, then we move on the village." Elena stood, rifle resting against her chest. "We've lost too many. They're dug in. If we advance, we won't make it." His eyes burned into hers. "You don't give the orders, Captain." The men shifted, uneasy. No one spoke. Her pulse hammered. She wanted to scream it, the truth, the warning, the reason she knew this ground like her own skin. But the words caught again, heavy with the weight of her silence. Because once she said it, there would be no turning back. So she let him turn away. For now. They dug shallow cover, waiting for dawn. The night dragged, thick with smoke and the stench of blood. The men spoke in low murmurs, voices cracking with exhaustion. Elena sat apart, back against a stone, rifle across her knees. She cleaned it slowly, cloth sliding over steel, a ritual steadying her hands. The boy approached, hesitant, his voice trembled. "You saved me back there." She didn't look up. "Stay sharper next time." He swallowed, nodded. Then softer, almost childlike, "Do you ever get used to it?" Her cloth stilled. The question hit deeper than the bullet fire. Used to it, the screams, the blood, the silence after. She thought of her brother's laugh, the way it had vanished into the night. The crater, the smoke, her hands clawing at rubble, finding nothing. Her chest ached, but she forced the words out. "No, you don't, and you shouldn't." The boy's face shifted, fear, confusion, then a small flicker of understanding. He nodded again and walked away. Elena's eyes followed him into the dark. He was too young. They all were. And yet here they were, bleeding into the same soil, chasing the same ghosts. She wiped the last of the oil from her rifle, her reflection faint in the steel. She didn't recognize her own eyes anymore. Dawn crept slow, pale light spilling across the valley, revealing what the night had hidden. The ground was red. The shacks were pocked with holes. Crows circled overhead, black specks against the rising sun. The colonel paced, voice low but sharp. "We advance in 20, no hesitation." Elena's chest tightened. 20 minutes to disaster. 20 minutes to watch more boys fall into the same trap. Her hands curled into fists. She couldn't hold it in anymore. She rose, voice cutting across the murmurs. "You'll kill them if you push." The colonel turned, fury in his eyes. "Stand down, Captain." No, her voice didn't rise, but it carried. Calm, cold, unshakable. "I've seen this ground before. I know how they fight here. If we move straight in, we won't walk out." The squad stilled, eyes flicked between them. The colonel's jaw clenched. "And how exactly do you know that?" The question she had dreaded, the question she couldn't dodge anymore. Her silence stretched, every eye on her, every breath held. She looked toward the village, then back to the men. Her voice dropped, heavy with a truth she had carried for years. "Because this is where my brother died." The words fell like stone. The boy's face shifted, sorrow flickering across it. The others looked down, unsure. Even the colonel froze, anger faltering for just a moment. Elena stood steady, though her chest burned. "I was here. The night they took him. The night they buried us in that crater. I crawled out. He didn't." Her throat tightened, but she didn't let it break her voice. "I know this place. I know their tricks. If you lead them forward, you'll lead them into the same grave." The silence was heavier than gunfire. For the first time since she'd returned, they saw her, not as a ghost, not as an afterthought, but as someone who had walked through this fire before. And maybe, just maybe, someone who could walk them out. The colonel's eyes narrowed, doubt warred with pride, control slipping through his fingers. But Elena didn't flinch. She broke in the silence. There was no going back. What happens when silence breaks, and no one knows what to do with the truth? The squad stared at her like they'd never seen her before. The colonel's face was stone, jaw locked, eyes hard, but underneath, just a flicker, a crack of doubt. Elena's voice lingered in the morning air. "This is where my brother died." No one moved. No one spoke. Even the crows overhead circled quieter now, as if the valley itself was waiting. The colonel finally broke the stillness. "We move as planned." His voice was sharp, but not as sharp as before. A murmur rippled through the men. Some glanced at Elena, waiting, uncertain. She felt the weight pressing on her. They wanted her to speak again, to lead, to save them from orders that would march them into graves. But her throat tightened. She wasn't their leader. She wasn't even sure she could save herself. Her eyes drifted to the boy, the young soldier she'd pulled back from death hours earlier. His face pale, lips pressed tight, eyes wide with fear but fixed on her. And in his gaze she saw it, the same trust her brother had once placed in her, trust she had failed before. Her hand tightened on the rifle. Her chest burned with the memory. "Not again." "Elena," the colonel's voice snapped her back. Not captain, not her rank, just her name spit out like a challenge. "You're letting ghosts cloud your judgment." She stepped forward, slow, deliberate. Her boots sunk into the blood-soaked earth. She met his eyes. "No, I'm letting ghosts remind me what happens if we ignore the truth." The squad's silence deepened. No one followed the colonel's glare. No one stepped behind him. For the first time, Elena realized the men weren't looking at him anymore. They were looking at her. And that terrified her more than the bullets. The colonel turned away, muttering under his breath, voice low with rage. but he didn't stop her when she crouched beside the map scratched into the dirt. She dragged her finger across the valley lines, marking routes only she remembered. Ambush points, hidden trenches, the curve of the river where bodies had once floated. "They'll expect you to come from here," she said, pointing at the shallow slope. "It's where they set the first trap, same as last time." One soldier swallowed hard. Another shifted his grip on the rifle, knuckles white. "But here," she continued, sliding her hand to a jagged ridge, "the rocks will give you cover. It's slower, harder, but you'll see their positions before they see you. If we move at first light, the sun will blind them on the ridge." The men leaned in, listening, believing. The colonel stayed back, silent, his pride warring with the crack in his authority. Elena pulled her hand away, voice quieter now. "We can't win this fight straight on, but we can survive it." The boy's whisper came first, "I'll follow her." Another man echoed, then another, until the silence broke into murmurs of agreement, heavy but certain. The colonel's fists clenched, but he didn't stop them. He couldn't. The choice had already been made. They moved at dawn. The sun crawled over the mountains, painting the valley gold. Shadows stretched long, cutting across the blood-stained mud. Elena led them toward the ridge, her boots crunching on gravel, her breath slow and steady. Every step felt heavier, as if the earth itself remembered her. The boy stayed close, too close, but she didn't push him away. His presence was a weight, yes, but also an anchor, proof she wasn't walking alone this time. The climb was brutal. Loose rocks, sharp winds, the sun blazing into their eyes. But higher they climbed, the wider their view. And then she saw it. The enemy's camp spread across the valley floor. Fighters moving between shacks, setting rifles in place, confident no one would see them. But from here she saw everything. The scope steadied, breath held, trigger brushed. One squeeze and a guard fell. The men around her followed, rifles barking in sharp bursts. Chaos rippled through the camp below. For once, it wasn't their squad caught in the trap. The firefight raged, echoing across the ridge. Bullets cracked off stone, sparks flying. Dust stung her eyes, the air thick with gunpowder. Elena moved with precision, each shot a thread in the tapestry of survival. But it wasn't clean. A scream tore through the ridge as one man dropped, clutching his stomach. Another stumbled, blood soaking his sleeve. The boy flinched, frozen, until Elena grabbed his vest and yanked him down. "Breathe, aim, fire." His hands shook, but he obeyed. His first shot missed. His second didn't. For a heartbeat, pride flickered through her, not in herself, in him. But then the sound came, a roar, low and grinding from the tree line. Engines. Her stomach turned cold. Two trucks burst from the brush, mounted guns tearing the ridge with fire. Stone shattered, dirt exploded, men screamed. The colonel shouted orders, his voice nearly lost in the storm. "Fall back, regroup." Panic rippled. The ridge was no longer safety, it was a cage. Elena's heart slammed. She knew this part. She'd seen it before. Trucks tearing the ridge, men scattering, no cover left. This was where her brother had fallen. And now she was standing in the same fire. She pressed low, breath ragged, eyes darting. The men were trapped. The colonel shouted, but his voice was drowned by gunfire. The boy clung to his rifle, face pale, frozen again. Her throat closed, her vision blurred. For a moment she was back in the crater, choking on smoke, her brother's hand slipping from hers. "Not again, not again." "Elena," the boy's voice cracked through the roar, his eyes on hers, wide, pleading. And in that moment she understood. Survival wasn't victory, not if it meant silence, not if it meant watching them fall the way he had. She rose from the stone, exposing herself to the fire. Bullets screamed past, one clipping her shoulder, heat and pain ripping through her. But she didn't stop. She lifted her rifle, sighted the truck's gunner, and fired. The man dropped. The gun fell silent. She shifted, fired again, Another fell. The men saw her, standing, bleeding, unshaken, and something broke loose in them. They rose, firing with new fury, driving the second truck back. Smoke filled the valley, fire roared, and then silence. The trucks were gone, the ridge held. For now, her knees buckled. She dropped behind the rock, pressing a hand to her shoulder. Blood seeped hot between her fingers. The boy knelt beside her, voice trembling. "You're hit." She forced a breath, steady, sharp. "I've been worse." His hands shook as he tried to tear a bandage from his kit. She grabbed his wrist, held it still. "Focus on your rifle. Don't waste your strength on me." His eyes filled, but he nodded. He obeyed. She leaned back against the stone, breath shallow, pain pulsing through her. The colonel crouched nearby, sweat streaking his face. For the first time, his eyes met hers without contempt, just silence, just acknowledgement. She didn't need his words. She didn't even want them. Because she knew what mattered. They were still alive. And survival, for the first time, didn't feel hollow. But deep down, she also knew the ridge was only the beginning. The real test still waited in the valley. And in that valley, ghosts never stayed buried. Why was the valley so quiet after so much fire? The ridge smoldered behind them. Smoke curled in slow ribbons clinging to the rocks. The survivors moved in silence, shoulders bowed, eyes hollow. They didn't speak about the men they'd left behind. They didn't have to. The absence walked with them. Elena pressed her hand against her shoulder, blood dried stiff beneath the bandage. Each step down the jagged slope was fire, but she made no sound. Pain was private, always had been. The boy glanced at her often, guilt shadowing his face, as if he should have stopped the bullet, as if he should have carried the wound instead. She gave him nothing, no comfort, no words, only the silent rhythm of her boots on stone. The colonel walked ahead, his posture rigid, pride stitched into every step. But he didn't speak to her, not a word since the ridge. He didn't have to. His silence wasn't dismissal anymore. It was recognition, bitter but real. And still the valley stretched before them, wide, empty, waiting. By noon, the sun pressed down like a weight. Heat shimmered off the rocks, sweat soaking into uniforms. The riverbed cracked under their boots, dry now, its silence louder than water ever could be. Elena slowed, scanning the terrain. Her eyes traced the bends in the earth, the jagged walls. Memory clawed at her. She had been here before. Her brother's laugh echoed in her mind, faint, ghostly. He'd been ahead of her, full of life, full of defiance, promising her that nothing could break them. And then gunfire, the roar of engines, the ground swallowing fire. She clenched her jaw until it hurt, dragging her gaze back to the present. She couldn't lose herself now, not here. But every rock, every shadow, every turn in the riverbed whispered the same truth. This was where it had happened, where she had crawled out alone. The boy's voice cut through the haze. "Captain, you know this place." She froze. He said it quietly, but the words carried. The men turned, eyes on her again. Not with doubt this time, with something heavier, expectation. She forced a slow breath, her voice steady. "I do." The colonel's jaw tightened. "And what do you see?" Her eyes swept the canyon walls. High ground, shadows, too much silence. "A trap," she said simply. They halted, spreading out, weapons ready. The silence pressed in thicker. No birds, no wind, just the faint creak of gear, the dry rasp of breath. Elena crouched, brushing her fingers against the dirt. It crumbled in her hand, dry and fragile. Her brother's voice rose in memory. "You always look at the ground, Lena, but war doesn't come from the ground. It falls from above." Her chest tightened. She lifted her gaze. The canyon walls, high, jagged, perfect for rifles. "Cover," she shouted. The first shots cracked a heartbeat later. Bullets rained from the cliffs. Dust exploded around them. Men dove for cover, pressing into the dry riverbed, trapped in a trough of earth. Elena flattened, scanning the walls. Shadows shifted in the glare, rifles flashing. She steadied her scope, fired, one fell, another ducked. The colonel barked orders, his voice straining against the chaos. Suppressive fire, left wall. But it wasn't enough. They were pinned, caught between earth and sky. The boy lay beside her, trembling hands fumbling at his rifle. His breath came in sharp gasps, panic rising. "Look at me," she said, voice cutting through the roar. His eyes snapped to hers. "Count," she told him, "in, out, 4 seconds each." His chest heaved. Then slowly he obeyed, breath in, breath out, his hands steadied, his rifle rose. Together they fired, not wild, not frantic, precise. Each shot a breath, each breath survival. The men around them saw. They steadied too, their fire sharpening, pushing the attackers back into the cliffs. But the silence between bursts, the silence in her chest, remained. Because this was exactly how it had been before. The same canyon, the same trap. And she knew how it had ended. When the shooting finally eased, dust hung thick in the air. Bodies lay scattered on the cliffs, black shapes against the sun. The survivors in the riverbed pressed against the dirt, sweat streaking their faces, breaths ragged. Elena stayed low, scanning the ridges. She didn't trust the quiet. The colonel crawled closer, dirt smeared across his jaw. His eyes met hers, sharp, demanding. "How do we move?" For a moment she almost laughed. Him asking her. The weight of his pride bent under necessity. But there was no satisfaction in it, only the heavy truth. She looked at the walls again, tracing the jagged lines, the shadows. Her brother's ghost walked there, leading her forward. "There's a path north," she said. "Hidden behind the rocks. Narrow, but it'll get us above them. We move fast, we take the high ground before they reset." The colonel studied her, then gave a single, curt nod. "You lead." The words landed heavier than gunfire. She didn't want them, but they were hers now. They moved, hunched low, boots scraping against stone. Every step echoed in her chest. She could feel the weight of the men behind her, their lives strung to her choices. The boy stayed at her side, his breath steady now. Not calm, but steady, the rhythm she'd given him. The path twisted narrow, rocks pressing in close. Shadows swallowed them. Halfway up they found it. A body. Elena froze. It lay slumped against the rock, uniform rotted, rifle rusted, bones showing through torn cloth. The men stopped, silence crushing them. Her heart stopped with it. She knew that patch, that insignia. Her throat closed. It was her brother's. The world narrowed, sound dulled. Her knees threatened to give. She reached out, fingers trembling, brushing the fabric. Dust crumbled away beneath her touch. Her chest burned, memories flooding, his laugh, his voice, his hand gripping hers in the crater before it slipped away. Her brother hadn't been buried, he had been left here, alone. The boy's voice broke the silence. "Captain." She couldn't answer, not yet. The weight of it crushed her. The colonel's voice was rough, quieter than before. "We don't have time." But she stayed a moment longer, hand on the fabric, the ghost of him pressed against her palm. When she finally pulled away, her voice was steel. "We move." But inside she shattered. The climb ended on the ridge. Sun blinding, air sharp with gunpowder. From here the valley sprawled wide. The enemy below scrambled, disoriented, unprepared for fire from above. The men opened up, rifles cracking, turning the tide. For the first time, victory felt within reach. But Elena didn't fire, not at first. Her eyes stayed on the path below, on the shadowed rock where she'd found him. Her brother, her ghost. She whispered under her breath, a vow no one else could hear. "I'll finish it, I swear." Then she lifted her rifle, and the valley burned. Why did silence feel heavier after victory? The ridge smoked behind them, echoing with the last cracks of gunfire. Below, the enemy had scattered, leaving weapons, bodies, and shadows clinging to the canyon floor. But up on the ridge, the men did not cheer. They did not smile. They only breathed hard, rifles still clenched, waiting for the next storm. Elena sat with her back against a rock, bandage soaked again, fingers trembling though she hid it. She had not looked at the men yet, not after what she'd found, not after her brother. Her eyes stayed on the horizon, the desert stretching endless and merciless. The boy lowered himself beside her, wordless at first. His hands shook faintly as he reloaded, metal clicking sharp in the stillness. Then softly he asked, "Was it him?" She didn't answer, her jaw locked. He swallowed, "I'm sorry." The words scraped raw. She wanted to lash back, tell him not to pity her. But when she looked at him, all she saw was youth, too young for this valley, too young to carry ghosts. So instead she said, "Keep your rifle clean. You'll need it before the night's done." And that was the end of it. By dusk, the colonel gathered them near a twisted tree, its roots clutching the dry soil like desperate hands. His face was gaunt, his voice edged with steel. "They'll regroup," he said. "And when they do, they'll come harder. We hold this ridge tonight or none of us leave this valley alive." The men listened, but their eyes kept flicking toward Elena, not the colonel, her. She felt it heavy, unwanted. When the colonel finished, one of the older soldiers, scarred face, missing a finger, spoke up. His voice cracked with weariness. "Captain, where do you want us?" The title hung in the air, not mocking this time, not questioning, just offered. Her stomach knotted. She wanted to deny it, to push it back to the colonel, to the chain of command. But when she looked at the colonel, he said nothing. His silence was its own order. So she gave in. "Spread out," she told them, voice low but firm. "Two on the left slope, two on the right. Claymores on the lower path. Rotate watch in twos. No noise, no light. They'll come in the dark." And the men obeyed. Just like that, leadership became hers. The night crawled in, slow and suffocating. Stars blinked through the smoke, cold and indifferent. The desert cooled, wind sliding across the ridge, carrying whispers of movement below. Elena lay prone at the crest, rifle steady, eyes cutting through the dark. The boy beside her shifted restlessly, then stilled under her glance. "Listen," she whispered. At first he shook his head, nothing. But then faint, almost swallowed by the wind, boots in sand, metal brushing stone. "They're here," she said. And then the night erupted. Muzzles flashed in the valley, red sparks biting at the dark. The ridge lit with answering fire, the crack and roar deafening in the silence of before. Elena fired until her shoulders screamed, each shot deliberate, each breath steady. Shadows fell in the valley, but more replaced them, climbing, clawing toward the ridge. The boy fired too, his fear masked now by grim rhythm. The older soldier laughed once, a harsh, broken laugh, before cutting down two figures on the slope. But still they came. Grenades arced, thudding, dirt exploding against the ridge. A man screamed, cut off mid-cry. The colonel shouted orders, voice hoarse, dragged thin by the weight of too many battles. And through it all, Elena kept firing. Not for orders, not for survival, but for him. For the brother who had fallen here, abandoned to rot in this valley. Each trigger pull was a vow. Each fallen enemy a promise kept. But vengeance is a fire. It burns what it touches. And when her scope caught a figure scrambling up the rocks, small, frail, barely more than a boy, her finger froze. He couldn't have been older than 16. His eyes wide, terrified, rifle clutched like a drowning man clutches air. Her brother's voice echoed in her head. "War doesn't come from the ground. It falls from above." Her sight stayed on the boy, her breath caught, her finger trembled. She didn't fire. Another shot rang out beside her, the colonel. The boy in the valley fell, tumbling back into the dark. The colonel's eyes cut to her, hard, accusing. But she didn't flinch, not outwardly, inside though something cracked. By dawn, the ridge was there still. Smoke and silence covered the valley again, bodies scattered like broken shadows. The men moved like ghosts, collecting weapons, water, whatever scraps could keep them alive one more day. No one spoke of the dead, not theirs, not the enemy. Elena sat apart watching the horizon. The sun rose cold, indifferent. Her rifle lay across her knees, heavy with choices she hadn't made. The boy approached, dirt and blood streaking his face. He crouched beside her, quiet a long moment before he asked, "Why didn't you shoot?" Her throat tightened. She should have lied. Said she didn't have the angle, said she didn't see him in time. But the truth clawed its way out. "Because he looked like my brother." The boy's eyes widened, then softened. He didn't argue, didn't judge, just sat there with her, silent. Sometimes silence was the only answer war allowed. Later, when the colonel came to her, his face was carved with exhaustion, his voice sharp. "You hesitate again, and you'll kill us all." She met his gaze. For once, she didn't look away. "If we lose everything to keep breathing, what's the point?" His jaw flexed, anger flashing, but he didn't reply. Because deep down, maybe he knew she was right. But right doesn't keep men alive. That night, when the ridge was quiet again, she dreamed of her brother. Not the boy she'd grown up with, laughing in fields, chasing wind. No, she dreamed of him as she'd found him, a husk in the canyon, alone, forgotten. And in the dream, he spoke. "You can't carry me, Lena. You can only carry yourself." She woke with tears on her cheeks, hands gripping her rifle too tight. And for the first time since the valley began, she wondered if survival really was victory. Or if survival without purpose was just another kind of defeat. Why did the desert look endless, even when death closed in from every side? They moved at dawn, shadows stretched long across the ridge. The men staggered under packs that felt heavier than flesh, their boots dragging, their eyes sunken. Every step was survival, nothing more. But for Elena, each step was something else. Her brother's remains had burned into her memory, dry bone against her hand, a reminder that survival alone meant nothing. If all they did was crawl one more day into the next firefight, what was the point? The colonel walked ahead, lips pressed thin, eyes locked on the horizon. His silence was brittle now, not pride but strain. She could see it. Everyone could. The men didn't look to him anymore. They looked at her. She didn't want it, but she carried it anyway. By mid-morning, the heat pressed down like iron. They found shade under a jagged outcrop, rifles resting, breaths shallow. The older soldier with the missing finger lit a cigarette, hands trembling. The smoke curled sharp and bitter in the still air. "You ever think," he muttered, voice low, "that maybe the valley isn't meant to be crossed, that maybe we're just feeding it?" No one answered, but his words stuck. The boy sat near Elena, wiping his rifle with cloth gone dark from use. His voice was soft, almost childlike. "Do you believe we'll make it out?" She paused. Her instinct was to say yes, to reassure. But her brother's voice echoed again, the memory of him laughing, telling her war doesn't fall from the ground. So she said only, "If we do, it won't be by chance. It'll be because we give it meaning." The boy frowned, not fully understanding, but he nodded anyway. The colonel heard. His eyes cut to her, sharp with something like anger or fear. That night under a bruised sky they found ruins. Stone walls half collapsed, a forgotten outpost, its silence older than the war itself. They slipped inside, shadows against shadows, and set a perimeter. Elena walked the edges, every stone, every crack whispering of ghosts. It was there she heard it. A voice, low, muffled, not theirs. She froze, motioning the boy close. Together they crept toward a broken wall, rifles raised. Behind the rubble in the dark hollow, two figures crouched, enemy uniforms, barely alive, wounds wrapped in cloth stiff with blood. Their eyes widened at the sight of her, but they didn't reach for weapons. They couldn't. They were too broken. The boy's breath hitched. "We should." But Elena raised her hand, stopped him. The men stared at her, silent, waiting. She felt her trigger finger twitch. A dozen reasons to end them here. No risk, no chance of betrayal. But then one of them whispered in broken words, half her language, half theirs. Water. Her throat tightened. She should have pulled the trigger, she knew it. The colonel would, half the men would. Instead, she lowered her rifle. Stay here, she told the boy. Then she moved, pulling her canteen, tipping water between the cracked lips of an enemy. The boy's eyes widened, confusion cutting deep. Why? She answered without looking up. Because if we let war erase everything, then what's left worth surviving for? But the colonel saw. When she returned to the group, he stood waiting, jaw hard, voice sharp. You fed them. Her silence was answer enough. His face twisted, fury held tight only by control. You'll get us killed. She met his gaze, steel against steel. No, I'll keep us human. For the first time, his voice broke. Humanity doesn't win wars. Her answer was quiet, but it cut deeper. Neither does losing it. He turned away, but she could see it in his shoulders. A crack. The weight pressing heavier now because his command wasn't his anymore. They slept in shifts that night, the ruins whispering around them. Elena lay awake, rifle at her side, eyes heavy but refusing to close. Her brother came again in memory, laughing, alive, reaching for her. But when she reached back, he turned to bone and dust. She woke in sweat, hand clutching empty air. The boy sat nearby, eyes wide in the dark. You dreamed too. Her throat closed, but she nodded. He didn't ask what of. He didn't need to. Dawn brought betrayal. The men rose, weary, moving through the ruins to gather gear. That's when they found the colonel. His pack was gone, his rifle too. He'd left in the night, alone. The silence that followed was heavy, crushing. Betrayal stung sharper than any bullet. The older soldier spat, voice raw. He left us to die. The boy looked at Elena, panic in his eyes. What do we do now? All eyes turned to her again. Not because she wanted it, because there was no one else. Her chest tightened. The responsibility felt like a noose. But she didn't flinch. We move, she said. Together we don't stop, and we don't forget who we are. The men nodded, one by one, and just like that the colonel's shadow was gone. They walked through the day with silence as their only companion. The sun blazed white, the air shimmering, the ground cracking under their boots. Elena led, rifle steady, eyes scanning every ridge, every shadow. By evening they reached another rise. From there the valley stretched wide and in the distance smoke rose. A camp, enemy, dozens of them, maybe more. The boy's voice broke the silence, thin with fear. We can't fight that. He was right, but Elena's eyes stayed fixed on the smoke, on the figures moving in the distance. Her brother's death had begun here. His ghost still waited. And for the first time, she felt the line blur fully, between duty and vengeance, between survival and meaning. She didn't know which side she stood on anymore. But she knew one thing. The valley wasn't done with her yet. And she wasn't done with it. Why did the smoke feel closer than it was? From the ridge, the camp below pulsed with life. Fires burned low, shadows moved between tents, rifles glinting under the fatting sun. Dozens of them, maybe more. The men crouched low, eyes wide, breaths tight. The boy clutched his rifle like a lifeline, his knuckles white. No one spoke. Except Elena. Her eyes stayed locked on the camp, on the smoke rising like a signal to the sky. Her brother's ghost whispered through memory, urging, pulling. This was the place. This was where it ended for him, and maybe for her. The boy broke the silence first. We can't take that, not with what's left of us. He was right. Every soldier there knew it, but none of them looked away. They all waited for her. Her voice was steady, but inside a storm raged. We don't fight them all. We don't need to. We cut the head, the rest scatter. The older soldier shook his head, fear sharp in his voice. That's suicide. Elena didn't deny it. She only whispered, so was crossing this valley. Night fell slow. They crawled closer, slipping between shadows, the ruins of their exhaustion carried in silence. Every crack of stone under boot felt deafening, every heartbeat too loud. Elena led, movements precise, controlled, though inside her chest burned with fire. The boy followed close, his breath shaky, but steadying whenever her hand lifted to signal. The camp's edge loomed. Guards at the perimeter, rifles slung, too confident in numbers to be sharp. Their laughter drifted faint, careless. Elena's eyes narrowed. She remembered laughter here once, her brother, before the valley had swallowed him. She raised her rifle. One breath, one shot. The first guard crumpled. Silence swallowed laughter. The men moved in, shadows striking shadows. Blades muffled shots, the thud of bodies hitting dirt. Swift, merciless. But not merciless enough to silence her thoughts. Each face in the firelight flashed with memory. Her brother, his grin, his fall. And with every life she took, she wondered, was she killing for them or for herself? By midnight they were inside the camp. Tents loomed, dim fires glowing, voices muffled within. The enemy moved, unknowing of the storm at their door. Elena crouched behind a crate, scanning. Her hand lifted, signaling the men to wait. The boy leaned close, whisper harsh, "Captain, why are we here, really?" She didn't answer at first. Her eyes burned on the command tent in the center, larger than the rest, its canvas glowing faint with lamplight. Finally she whispered, "Because this is where it started, and this is where it ends." The boy swallowed, fear and confusion tangled in his face. But he didn't argue, he followed. They slipped closer, the camp alive with restless silence. Elena's breath slowed, her body heavy but unshaken. At the tent's flap she paused. For one moment she closed her eyes, and in the dark she saw him, her brother, his hand reaching for hers, his laugh fading into gunfire, his body left behind. Her jaw clenched, her hand pushed the flap aside. Inside, lantern light spilled gold across maps, weapons, and a man bent over them. Older, scarred, eyes sharp with command. The enemy commander. He looked up, saw her. And in that breath time froze. Her rifle leveled, breath steady. The man didn't reach for a weapon, didn't move. He only studied her, his gaze cutting deep, calm even with death staring at him. "You look like him," he said, his voice low, rough. Her heart stuttered, "What?" "Your brother," he said. "The one who died here. He fought hard, harder than most. He refused to surrender." Her hands shook. "You killed him." The man's eyes didn't flinch. "I offered him mercy. He refused, so yes, I gave him death." Her chest burned, rage clawing up her throat. Every fiber screamed to pull the trigger to end him. But then his words twisted deeper. "He asked me one thing before the end. He asked me to tell his sister, 'Don't carry me too long.'" Her breath broke, her vision blurred. Her brother's voice in her dreams echoed here in the mouth of her enemy. It couldn't be true, it couldn't. But what if it was? Her finger hovered on the trigger, shaking. The boy's voice behind her cracked, "Captain, do it." The older soldier hissed, "End him now." But her mind spiraled, every memory, every ghost, every breath of her brother tangled in this moment. She could kill him, avenge, satisfy the fire. Or she could listen, and let the fire burn her empty. Her finger froze. The commander's eyes stayed on hers, steady, unblinking. This valley doesn't need more bodies. It needs someone to walk out alive. Her breath came sharp, heavy. And then she lowered the rifle. Gasps behind her, the boy's voice broke, desperate. "Why?" Her answer came quiet, trembling but firm. "Because survival without purpose isn't victory, and vengeance isn't purpose. Not anymore." The commander's eyes flickered with something, respect or maybe just surprise. He didn't move, didn't speak again. Elena stepped back, turning away, her chest hollow, her brother's ghost fading with each step. The men followed, confused, shaken but alive. They slipped back into the night, leaving the camp smoldering with silence. By dawn, they reached the far edge of the valley. The horizon stretched wide, pale light spilling over distant hills. Freedom. But Elena didn't smile, didn't cheer. She stopped at the crest, boots sinking into dust, eyes locked on the valley behind. Her brother was gone now, truly gone. And with him, the fire that had driven her this far. The boy stood beside her, his voice small. "So did we win?" Elena's eyes stayed on the valley, quiet a long moment before she answered. "No, we survived, and maybe that's enough." The boy nodded slowly, his young face etched with scars of something deeper than war. The men gathered behind, silent, waiting for orders, but she gave none. She only stood there, watching the valley fade into distance. Because sometimes the only victory left is walking away. The valley was behind them, but it never truly left. Days blurred into one another as they walked, every mile pulling them further from fire and smoke, yet dragging the weight of silence deeper into their bones. The boy stumbled often, exhaustion dragging at his small frame. Elena always steadied him, a hand at his shoulder, a quiet word, never more. She had no comfort left to give, only presence. The others marched hollow-eyed, their silence more deafening than any gunfire they had endured. Survivors, not soldiers, not heroes, just the remnants of something once whole, now fractured, scarred. And yet they walked. The first village lay in ruin. Houses hollowed, walls burned, the air still carrying a faint trace of smoke. No one alive, only ghosts. The boy stared at the wreckage, his voice trembling. Was it like this everywhere? Elena's throat tightened. She didn't answer, she couldn't, because she had seen too many places just like this. Too many names turned to ash. She walked on, the others followed. At night, when they lit no fires and ate in silence, she lay awake, staring at the endless dark. And always her brother's voice returned, fainter now but still there. "Don't carry me too long." She closed her eyes, tried to let go, but her hand still clenched the rifle as though it were the only thing keeping her alive. The road forked at the river, one path east toward the mountains, another north toward the border where maybe, just maybe, others had survived. The men argued in low voices, fear bleeding into their words. East was safer but isolated. North meant risk. North meant war. Elena listened, silent, eyes on the current of the river. It moved swift, endless, uncaring of the stones it passed. The boy tugged at her sleeve. "Where do we go?" Her chest ached at the question. Command still clung to her shoulders, though she wanted nothing more than to lay it down. But the boy's eyes searched hers, desperate for an answer, for something steady in the chaos. So she gave him the only truth she had. "We go where people still breathe." North. The journey wore them thinner with each step. Hunger clawed at their ribs, thirst cracked their lips. Still they walked. At dawn they passed another ruin. At dusk another grave. The boy's questions grew quieter, fading into silence. The other's eyes dulled, fixed only on the dirt ahead. And yet Elena pressed on, not because she wanted to, not because she believed in victory anymore, but because stopping meant the valley had claimed them after all. And she refused to give it that. One night the boy woke screaming. Dreams had dragged him back into the valley, his voice shattering the silence they kept. Elena was at his side instantly, hand over his mouth, eyes sharp with urgency. The others stirred, rifles clutched tight. But no one came, no enemy, only echoes of their own ghosts. The boy's tears soaked her hand. When she pulled it away, his voice cracked. "I can't do this anymore. I can't keep walking." Her chest broke at the words because she remembered them, on her brother's lips, whispered once in the trenches before he forced a grin and stood anyway. She brushed the boy's hair back, her voice a rasp. "Then don't walk for yourself. Walk for the ones who can't anymore." His eyes glistened in the dim starlight, confusion and sorrow tangled. Like your brother. She swallowed hard, like all of them. He nodded weakly, curling closer, his breath hitching until it steadied. Sleep dragged him under again. But Elena didn't sleep. She only stared at the horizon, where faint light threatened the edge of night. By the seventh day, the hills rose higher, greener. The scars of war thinned. The air smelled cleaner. And then voices. Real voices. They froze, crouched low, weapons raised. Shapes moved between the trees ahead, cautious, armed. Survivors, not enemy. The boy gasped, hope breaking his silence. The others exchanged wide-eyed glances, the first flicker of life sparking in days. Elena raised her hand, keeping them still, her breath tight. One of the strangers stepped forward. A woman, rifle slung but lowered, her eyes sharp, suspicious, but not cruel. Her words cut through the still air. "Where are you from?" Elena opened her mouth, but no sound came. What answer was left? The boy spoke instead, his voice trembling but strong. "From the valley, we survived." The woman's eyes widened. Whispers rippled through the group. One man crossed himself. Another shook his head in disbelief. The woman stepped closer, studying Elena. "And you led them out?" Elena's jaw clenched. Her gaze dropped to the dirt. "I walked," she said finally, "nothing more." But the boy straightened beside her, his small shoulders firm. "No, she led us. She saved us." The silence that followed felt heavier than any battle. The woman's eyes softened just slightly. "Then you're welcome here." The camp of survivors wasn't large. Tents scattered, fires burning low, children's laughter faint but real. Real. The men of her unit collapsed almost at once, eating, drinking, some weeping openly for the first time. The boy stayed close to her, clinging like a shadow, but his eyes finally lit with something other than fear. Elena stood apart, watching. Her hand still shook when she set the rifle down. Her chest still burned with the ghosts of the valley. But when the boy laughed, quiet, hesitant, but real, she felt something loosen inside her. Not release, not forgiveness, but something close. That night, under a sky scattered with stars, she walked alone beyond the camp's edge. The wind was soft, carrying no smoke, no blood, only the scent of pine and earth. She knelt, pressing her hand into the dirt, cold, steady, alive. And for the first time since the valley, she whispered, not to herself, not to the wind, but to the ghost who had walked beside her every step. "I'm not carrying you anymore, but I'll remember always." The wind stirred, soft across her cheek, almost like a hand. She closed her eyes, breathing deep. For the first time in years, she didn't see fire when she closed them. She saw the boys laugh, the men's tired smiles, the flicker of something worth saving. And when she stood again, her shoulders felt lighter. Not healed, never healed, but human. By dawn, she returned to the camp. The boy was awake, waiting, eyes heavy but hopeful. "Captain?" he asked softly. She almost corrected him, almost told him she wasn't his captain anymore. But instead, she smiled, faint, weary, real. "Yes." He hesitated, then whispered, "Are we safe now?" Her gaze swept the camp, the hills, the rising sun. Safe? No, not in this world, maybe never. But she rested her hand on his shoulder, steady, grounding. "For now," she said, "and for now is enough." The boy nodded, relief softening his face. He leaned into her side, small, fragile, alive. And for the first time, Elena let herself breathe. The valley would never leave her. Its shadows would follow always, carved into her skin, her bones, her soul. But she had walked out. And with her so had others. In the end, maybe that was the only victory that mattered. Not vengeance, not glory. Just survival together.